Hello, this is Scholar Shark Dudes Matt. Today we're going to be looking at solving polynomials in factored form. So we're going to run into these type of terminology here, this thing called roots. And basically, so let's look at example 1. A root is a solution to a problem where one side is equal to 0. So in this case, it's the right side. And whenever we have that situation, whenever we get an answer, it's called a root. It can be also called a zero or solution. And should I go over the vertical motion model just yet? Let me think about that. We'll look at that a little bit later. And then the zero product property. So this is what this says. Let's say a and b be real numbers. If we know that these two numbers a and b, when we multiply them together, we get 0. That means a has to be 0 or b has to be 0, because anything times 0 is 0. So if b was 0, that means a could be basically anything, and because that would work. If a was 0, then b could be anything. So that's what the zero product property says. If you have two numbers being multiplied together and they equal 0, that means one of them has to be 0. So let's look at an example. X minus 5 is a number, and x plus 4 is a number, and they're being multiplied together and they're being equal to 0. So because of the zero product property, either x minus 5 equals 0 or x plus 4 equals 0. So we're going to get two answers here. So if I solve the left equation, x minus 5 equals 0, I get rid of the negative 5 by adding 5 to both sides. I'll get x equals 5. The other equation, x plus 4 equals 0, I have to subtract 4 from both sides, and I'll get x equals negative 4. So my answer is x equals 5 or x equals negative 4. Because if I plug either of those into the equation, I'll get 0. And if you want to perform a check, let's do it. So let's say x equals 5. Then I'll have 5 minus 5 times the quantity 5 plus 4. Does that equal 0? I'll have 0 times 9, which does equal 0. So now I'm going to check negative 4. I'll have negative 4 plus 5, or negative 4 minus 5, times the quantity negative 4 plus 4. I'll get negative 9 times 0, which is correct. Okay, solve the equation. X plus 6 times the quantity x minus 3. These are just two numbers being multiplied together, and they equal 0. So either a is 0 or b is 0. So x plus 6 equals 0, or x minus 3 equals 0. That means x equals negative 6, or x equals 3. Part B, as you're working with these, it'll become a lot quicker. That this is x equals 8 or x equals 5. Example 2, factor out the greatest common monomial factor. Okay, so remember, monomial is just one term. It could be 8x, it could just be 8, it could be it could be 3, it could be y, but we're going to factor out a greatest common monomial. So basically, we're talking about factors. So if I looked at 16, what can that be broken down into? 8, 2. So if we're looking at factors of 16, that could be 8 and 2, 18, or 8 times 2 gives you 16. 4 times 4 gives you 16, and 16 and 1. If we look at 40, 40 could be 8 and 5, 10 and 4, 20 and 2. And so what happens is, what we're looking for is a common factor. The biggest common factor. Oh, and no, it's not using hello. Oops. This would be 40 and 1. So we have, am I missing anything else? 8, 5, 10, 4, 22, 41. If there's any others, then it doesn't matter, because we're looking for the greatest common. Greatest common. So what that means is, what factor do they share? And it happens to be this 8 value here. That is the greatest common factor. So we're going to factor out the 8. So what does that mean? So looking back at the original problem, we have 16x plus 40. I'm going to factor out an 8. Okay, if I factor out an 8, that means I'm going to take 16 and divide it by 8. So that's 2x. And then from 40, I'm going to divide by 8. 840 divided by 8 is 5. And then we just have the y there. And then we're done. Okay, and if you ever want to check, just distribute your 8 and make sure you get the original equation. So if I wanted to check, I would just go ahead and distribute 16x plus 40y. That's my original problem, so we're good. Okay, let's look at B. So 6 and 30. So if I look at 6, we have 6 and 1. We have 3 and 2, and that's it. If we look at 30, we have 6 and 5. And I'm going to stop there because 6, highest factor is 6. And so the most commonly shared one would be 6 in this case. So I'm going to factor out a 6. So 6 divided by 6 is 1, so I'm left with x squared here. And then 30 divided by 6 is 5, so x cubed. Okay, but I'm not done yet. These both have x's. I can factor out, so let's look at x squared and x cubed, for example. The factors of x squared is just x times x. X cubed is x times x times x. So I can factor out 2 of those x's. So 6x squared, if I pull that out, x squared divided by x squared is just 1. And if I take x cubed divided by x squared, that'll give me 1x left. And this is factored. So one way to look at it, you're trying to find a number that divides evenly into both, and then take it out. but you want the greatest. Alright, let's do another one. So we're looking at factors of 10, which is 10, 1, 5, 2, and that's it. 24, we have 12 and 2, 6 and 4, 8 and 3. So the biggest one here we can factor out is just 2. So 10 divided by 2 is 5, x squared, and then minus 24 divided by 2 is 12y squared. And there's nothing we can do about the x and y because either term doesn't share an x or a y. They're two separate entities. Okay, so let's look at what these guys share. 3 and 8. If I look at factors of 3, I'll get 3 and 1. If I look at 8, I'll get 4 and 2 and 8 and 1. So their biggest factor is 1, but we can't pull out a 1, because if that's the same thing here if I did that, right? That's the same thing. But they do share t's. This one has 6 t's, and this one has 4 t's. So I can factor out 4 of those t's. 3t, so if I take out 4 t's, I'll get 3t squared, there's 2 left. And then here I just have the number 8. There's no more t's. Alright, so now we're going to solve these equations by factoring. So what we're going to do is look at 3 and 15. We know we can pull out 3, because 3 goes into both of those. And they both share an x, 1x, so we can pull out an x from both of those. So if I pull out a 3x from here, the 3 goes away and becomes 1, and x squared divided by x becomes x. 15 divided by 3 is 5, and if I pull out an x, then x goes away. And we have this equal to 0. So either 3x is equal to 0, or this b value here is equal to 0. So 3x equals 0, so that means x equals 0, because if you divide both sides by 3, you'll get 0 divided by 3, and so that means x is 0, or x plus 5 is equal to 0, so x equals negative 5. Okay, 9b squared equals 24b. So what you want to do is move everything to one side of the equation. 9b squared. So I need to move this 24b. I'm not trying to solve for b right now, I'm just moving it over. So in order to do that, I'm going to subtract 24b from both sides. B squared and b are two different things. They're not like terms, so you can't add them together. So I have 9b squared minus 24b, and then that's going to be equal to 0. Okay, now I can factor out something. So if I look at 9 is 9 and 1 and 3 and 3, and 24, 8 and 3. And I'm going to stop there because the biggest factor is 3. And they both share a b, so I'm going to take out a b. So 9 divided by 3 is 3. If I take away a b, I'm left with 1b. And then 24 divided by 3 is 8. If I take away the last b there, that's all I have. Set that equals 0. So either 3b is 0 or 3b minus, not 36, but 3b minus 8 equals 0. So I'm going to add 8 over both sides, and I'll get 3b equals 8. Divide both sides by 3, and I'll get b is equal to 8/3. So either b is 0 or b is equal to 8/3. Alright, let's do some more. So they both share a d, so I'm going to factor out a d. If I take away 1d there, I'll be left with 1. And then if I take away a d from negative 7d, it'll just be minus 7. So either d equals 0 or d minus 7 equals 0. So d equals 7. Okay, this one I'm going to subtract 2b from both sides, so everything is on one side of the equation. 8b squared minus 2b is equal to 0. I can factor out 2, and I can factor out a b. 8 divided by 2 is 4, and if we take away a b, we have 1 left over. Factor out a 2 from 2, that becomes 1, and then factor out a b, so we just have 4b minus 1. So either 2b is equal to 0, so b equals 0, or 4b minus 1 equals 0. Add 1 over, we'll get 4b equals 1. Divide both sides by 4, and we'll get b equals 1/4. Alright, so word problems. So, so basically, you'll learn this in physics. But let's say we shoot some sort of projectile or throw a ball, for example. They usually follow this sort of arc. And this formula here tells you what the height of the ball or the projectile, whether it be a rocket or a bullet or just someone throwing a ball. This equation tells you the height of the object given a certain speed and time. So h, the height of the object, equals negative 16 times t squared, where t is time, plus vt. So v is the initial velocity, so how fast it was going as it was leaving either the barrel or your hands, or how fast it was going initially. And then plus s is the initial height. So, because if you were throwing a ball, you would be standing somewhat above the ground, and the ball would be above the ground. So let's look at that. So we have our equation here. Okay, the function, let's say height here, is equal to negative 16t squared plus vt plus s. So we need to examine this paragraph or the sentence here and find out all our variables. So after how many seconds does it land on the ground? So we are looking for t. So t is unknown. A fountain sprays water into the air with an initial velocity of 20 feet per second. So velocity equals 20. And our initial height so they don't tell us the initial height of the fountain. So we're going to have to assume that the fountain is on the ground. The spout, where it shoots the water. So we're going to say it's on the ground, which wouldn't make sense. So fountain on the ground sprays water in the air with an initial velocity of 20 feet per second. After how many seconds does it land on the ground? So we're solving for t. So h equals... So h is after time t. So this is also going to be 0. So h is going to be 0. Because we're trying to figure out how long it takes to land on the ground. Ground level is 0. So negative 16t squared plus vt. So v is 20. So plus 20t plus our initial height, which is 0. So we're going to factor out. So we have negative 16 and 20. Negative 16 factors of 16 is 4 and 4. 16 and 1. 20, 4 and 5. 10 and 2. 20 and 1. So the largest thing we can pull out is a 4. And they both share a t, so we're going to factor out a t as well. So I'll get negative 4t plus 5. So either 4t is 0, so t equals 0, which doesn't make sense because, technically the water hasn't left the ground yet, so you could say at the beginning, or negative 4t plus 5 equals 0. So I subtract 5 over it, I'll get negative 4t. Now let's do this with a little bit more space. So on the right side here, negative 4t plus 5 equals 0. So I'm going to subtract 5 over and get negative 4t equals negative 5. And then I'm going to divide both sides by negative 4. And we'll get t equals 5 over 4, which is 1.25 seconds. So it'll take 1.25 seconds for the water to land on the ground. Hopefully this helped you out. It's a bit confusing. Try out problems. Ask your teacher for some help. Have a good day.